Sorry for the hair. My hair is crazy. Today we're going to be talking about the painting process and some of the things that I learned from painting this little bell pepper right here. This was fun for me to do. I think I'm happy with it. For the most part, I feel like I'm happy with it. I'm really trying my best to not be so critical of the art that I create because of the fact that I am a very new painter in the scope of the amount of time that I plan to put into my painting career. Like, in reality, I've been painting with oil paints for less than a year now, and I think I've made probably 20-ish paintings. So keeping that in mind, with the fact that I plan to paint for the rest of my life, for as long as my mind and my limbs will allow me to, I plan to paint for the rest of my life. So therefore, like, how could I be super critical about what I am creating right now? That's not to say that I don't want to look at the art that I'm creating and look back at it and think to myself, like, what would I want to improve? What would I want to change? But I'm just trying to say that I think it doesn't help to be super critical of yourself, especially when you're a new artist. I guess that could be tip number one. Another thing that I learned while doing this painting is that you can actually create a pretty good painting in the dark. I had this huge misconception that you had to have a significantly bright room in order to create a painting that was going to be good. You know, like the colors were going to be good and all of that. And I used to paint out in our living room where we have a bunch of windows. Like, we have a ton of windows in our house. And I used to paint out there, and it would be flooded with light. And as soon as it started to become like evening, you know, and the sun started to go down and I didn't have that much light anymore, I'd be like, I ain't painting, I'm not painting, you know, and I would stop. And while you cannot paint in pitch black, in pitch black darkness, unless for some reason you're dealing with some kind of bioluminescent paint or like glow in the dark paint, while you can't do that, you can paint fairly dark. So in this painting that you see me doing of this red bell pepper, I actually have one light. The rest of the room is entirely dark, and the same light that is shining on the bell pepper is also shining on my canvas. So it's just one single light, and it's not like a super fancy studio light. It's literally one of these bad boys right here. Just one of these bad boys. I think that I did make sure to get a 5,000 Kelvin, is that what it's called? Like the neutral lighting, 5,000 Kelvin bulb in here. And I think like the lumens on it is like 10,000 or something like that. Like, it's not that bright. It looks bright probably in this video, just because that's the, you know, as far as like the post editing and stuff like that. But I tried this out because I knew, or I saw a bunch of different videos of people talking about how like your lighting is going to affect the paintings that you create. And one thing that I noticed with many of my other paintings is that they would come out relatively dark looking. Like on a regular day, just looking at the painting, the colors in it weren't as vibrant, they were dark, and all of that. And I think that had to do with the fact that I was painting in very, very bright settings. And so that's going to make it to where when you're mixing your paints, you're not going to be mixing these super bright colors. You're not going to be mixing these highly saturated colors that will stand out when you are outside of that brightly lit studio space. So for this bell pepper painting, I just decided to go with one single light. It was pretty dark in the room, and sure enough, the painting itself, just on like a regular day outside of a studio, like it looks good. And I do think it's probably one of the most vibrant paintings that I have done in quite a long time. Another thing I think that a lot of beginners have a rough time with, including myself, like my first few paintings were totally muddy, and I still create muddy paintings today. But something I'm pretty proud about with this bell pepper is that it is not muddy. And I think I did a few things to help me not be so muddy. One is that I attempted, as best as I could, not to blend out too much of the painting. And what I mean by that is that I would just lay down a mark, right? Like you would make a mark with your paintbrush, and I would try my best not to try and blend it out. That's not to say that I don't have some soft edges. Like clearly I have soft edges in this painting, but I wouldn't overwork those soft edges. I would maybe just like dab real quickly trying to blend it out, and then, you know, I would accept it and I would move on. The other thing that I did with this painting is I used a lot of different brushes. I think I used about like 7 different brushes. I basically used a different paintbrush for every single color and every single value. So I had like my dark red paintbrush, and then I had my lighter red paintbrush. And I did the same thing when it came to the greens, when it came to the blues, when it came to the blacks. I used to just wipe my paintbrushes off with a paper towel in order to change the colors around, and that worked relatively well, but I just noticed that if I dedicate certain paintbrushes to certain values and certain colors, it just helped me not be muddy. I don't think that you have to do it that way. I would like to get better at not being muddy without having to use so many different paintbrushes during the painting session. However, that's what I did on this. I was also very mindful of not putting any white into my dark colors. So white will completely kind of like wash out a color in my experience. And like once you put white into a dark, it's very hard using that same paintbrush and not cleaning it off thoroughly. It's very hard to, you know, get back to a very, very dark color. Something I've been working really hard at, but also feel like I kind of failed when it came to this painting, or at least with certain sections of this painting, is overworking certain areas. Like going over them over and over again, I would say that it looks like I put, you know, a lot of unnecessary marks, or I would make a mark and then I would just go back and change that mark later. Specifically, I think I see this in certain sections, like when I'm trying to put highlights onto the bell pepper, especially on the left-hand side. It's like I was, you know, trying to lighten it up, but then I wanted it to be dark, and and then lighten it up again. Like I could not figure out the balance here, and it was pretty difficult. And it was even worse when it came to the napkin on the bottom. That was very hard for me. The cloth on the bottom was very difficult for me. I just kept on changing it over and over again. It's probably my least favorite part of this painting. I don't like the way that the tablecloth, you know, turns out in the ends. But again, we're not being too critical here. We're trying to say positive things. We're trying to talk about the things that we feel like that I did. Are we talking about this? The things I'm trying to be positive. Let's just be positive. Something over the past week that really stood out to me is that if you use just one brush during your painting, one type of brush, for example, I was using a flat brush, the one where it's cut off straight up at the top. Right, I was just using that on this painting, and it makes your painting less interesting because when you do have a hard edge, those hard edges are going to be very fine, very straight in comparison to where if I had a flat, not a flat brush, a filbert, is it called a filbert? Or if I had a round brush, then I think it would create more interesting brush strokes. It would add some variability in there, and it's something that I intend to improve upon within this next week, is using multiple brushes, which I did use, but using multiple types of brushes, not just a bunch of flat brushes. So there's some of my reflections with this painting and some of the tips that I have for beginners, and myself included. I'm a beginner. I do not claim whatsoever to be a master at oil painting, but I am committed to this thing. I'm committed to painting for as long as I possibly can. And I would like to document the journey. So if you stick around, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.